Hey everybody, OperationZ here, and we're continuing with the story of Abraham, part 20. And we're picking up where we left off from part 19, where the two angels go to scout out Sodom and Gomorrah to see if the cry of it that came before the Lord is as bad as it actually was, just to make sure before they utterly destroy the city and everyone and everything that's in it, because of how corrupt and vile that the city and cities became. And, the cry of it being is the blood of the dead ones, and just all the, probably torture and anguish that came from the cities, from all the bad that was happening, the murders, the just all of the corruption that happened with the city, all the bad that was happening there accumulated, like pretty much the worst stuff that they could be doing, they were doing in the cities. And, it's as the cry of the righteous blood of Abel that went before the Lord when Cain slew him. And God knew of it too, because he said his very blood cried out from the ground, before the Lord and to the Lord. And, we see that here in this much larger city, in both cities, Sodom and Gomorrah. And God, out of compassion, before just utterly destroying the city, wanted to come down and see, of a certainty what was actually going on. And, basically, that being said, they continue to do that. They go and they stay with Lot. Lot urges them to stay at the house with them, and then the whole house is surrounded by the men of Sodom from every quarter, both old and young, and they strike them with blindness, and they can't find them within the city, like what their intentions were to do to the two angels, and all these things that transpired and took place. Once they saw how vile the city was, the angels say to Lot, you and your family take all your possessions and everything you got and leave the city, because they're going to utterly destroy the city of Sodom and the city of Gomorrah. So that's where we leave off, or that's where we're picking up from. And we're going to start here in Genesis chapter 19, verse 15. And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, arise, take thy wife and thy two daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. So they're saying, unless you all die too from the great sins of the city, then basically you and your family need to go and get out of this land, because they're going to come and destroy it. And that's what the angels are telling Lot and his family right now. And that word iniquity, when we talk about and refer to different types of sins, iniquity is what's known as known sin. Basically, the people knew that all of this was very bad, what they were doing, all these things that they were doing. The murders, the thievery, the rapes, all the stuff that was taking place in the city, the great corruption and vile behavior that was going on. They knew it was very bad, and basically, before even the Ten Commandments came about, because this is before the Ten Commandments was given and all these things, man was given that ability to know right from wrong when it comes to things like this, because of the knowledge, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that was given to man from the days of Adam and Eve. And, the people in the city here were doing all this bad and all this wrong, and they knew it was bad, and they were just doing it anyway because they could get away with it, they thought. There was no law and order in the city, And because there was no law and order keeping it established, that it wasn't, and if there was, it wasn't well enforced enough, that the cities became that way. And it just ended up being what it became as the angels saw. So they said, basically, Lot, you and your family get out of the city because we're going to overthrow and destroy both Sodom and Gomorrah. So let's continue where we left off here. So Genesis chapter 19, verse 16. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand and upon the hand of his wife and thy 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him, and they brought him forth and set him without the city. So God remembered Lot, and he remembered Abraham. So he wanted to show compassion and mercy onto Lot and onto his family that were within the city, that the angels laid hands upon them and quickly brought them forth and set them without the city so they would not be utterly destroyed. So Genesis chapter 19, verse 17, and it came to pass, when they brought him forth abroad, that he said, escape for thy life, neither look not behind thee, nor stay thou in all the plain, escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. So the angels give him a commandment, basically, don't go in any of this area around about here, around these cities, because all of it's going to be consumed and destroyed. So go here to this mountain. And instead of going along with it, this is what Lot chooses to do here next with this next verse, that, he just chose to do this. And we're going to see what he does right here. And Genesis 19:18, and Lot said unto them, oh, not so, my Lord. So he says, well, no, I don't want to do this. And he's saying, basically, he didn't want to go up into the mountain, and we're going to see why he didn't want to go up into the mountain. So Genesis chapter 19, verse 19 says this, behold now, thy servant hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy, which thou hast shewed unto me in saving my life. And I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me, and I die. So he was doubtful of the security and the protection that God more than likely would have given Lot and his family had they just went up into the mountain. He was doubtful and fearful, as we see from that. And being rational, when we look at it that way too, the way he's thinking and his mindset, the reason for this, like, unless some evil overtake me and I die, basically the mountains in these areas, different areas, they have stuff like mountain lions, and they have, bears and all kinds of stuff. And some parts of those areas, like in Egypt, for example, in the wilderness of Egypt, there's jackals. There's just all kinds of hazardous stuff, when we're just looking at the wildlife of it, that they have these. And it's also mentioned too that, on the way there's like all these kind of slime pits that are there. It talks about, as someone was fleeing, they actually, a lot of them fell and died in slime pits. I don't know if that would be a thing that would be worrisome, but, basically, that being said, pretty much the wildlife alone could be pretty wild. And, on top of that, it's also dangerous because of marauders, that whatever they would have called them, basically bandits, stuff like that, especially so close to these very corrupt and vile cities. He's probably thinking in his head, well, what about all these, bandit groups and whatever else that could be around that just want to basically kill people and steal everything they got. and whatever else. They're probably having that into consideration too. When you get far enough away from the city, and these cities in particular, like I said, are very corrupt and vile, and they're so far gone with what's right and wrong that God has to destroy those cities, that it got so bad, and he destroys them, and we're going to see how he destroys them very shortly, before too long. And so we can continue on now. And he said, "No, not so, my Lord." And then he said about that, wherein we read verse 19, "Lest some evil take me and I die." He was worried about that. So this is what's said in response. Genesis chapter 19, verse 20. "Behold now," well, not in response, this is still him talking what he wants to do. "Behold now, this city is near to flee on to, and it is a little one. Oh, let me escape hither. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live." So the city he's talking about is the city of Zor, or Zoar as they call it. I think it's Zor, Zoar. And they go and they flee there instead because they feel it's just a safer place to go. It's a city that is kind of near to Sodom and Gomorrah, but not too close. That basically that happens, that they want to go there. And this is what the angels say in response. So Genesis chapter 19, verse 21, "And he said unto him, See, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow this city, for the which thou hast spoken." So we see here this promise that, okay, we've accepted your proposal here, and we're not going to overthrow this city for what you've spoken on to us. They're saying basically they will spare that city and leave it alive. And the major corrupt ones being the bigger cities anyway, Sodom and Gomorrah. But from the sound of it, the ones round about were still under influence with these cities, that these were the bigger ones. And the whole area just gets totally devastated and destroyed because of how vile and corrupt that they got. So that's where we're at here. They let him go, and he goes on to Zor, and he stays there, him and his family. And that is where we leave off in this video, and you all have a blessed day.